tablet, and now we'll start recording on the video. Okay, so Sojourner Truth, Part 1, Beginning. Isabella Hardenbergh was born circa 1797. That's 1797. Just like when we talked about Harriet Tubman, enslaved people were considered property, so most of their, they weren't registered with the state or with any type of government when they were born, and rarely were they even put into the records at their owner's documentation. If they were documented as having been born or anything happening, marriage, death, etc., that would have been in their logbook, along with their how many heads of cattle they had, when their cow was born, when they sold off a cow to a neighbor or at auction. And most farmers were illiterate or semi-illiterate, and they just didn't keep documents well. She was born in Ulster County, New York, to Betsy and James. The last name, Hardenbergh, that was her owner's name. Most slaves, they just had to take on their owner's last name. She was born into a Dutch-speaking farm. Therefore, she knew only the Dutch language. She didn't know English. Her owner, Johanne, owned, according to records, as far as they can tell, he owned 7 slaves. I don't know what his occupation was. I tried researching it online. There were some contradictions there considering Johanne and his life. So, I don't know. A couple sources say he was a patent holder. I'm not finding that true because the death dates don't match the death dates of the Johanne I'm talking about here. Isabella knew only one of her siblings, Peter, as all of her other siblings were sold. Let me read you a passage in this book. You see, it's called Sojourner Truth in Her Own Words, written by Peter and Connie Roop. It's a scholastic book. There you go. I'm showing it on the other videos. This is talking about one of the instances when one of her siblings got sold. This was a story that her mother told her growing up. That terrible morning, Michael got up with the birds, kindled a fire, calling for his mama, that's the Dutch word for mother, to come, for all was ready for her. Steaming horses pulled a sleigh over the snow-covered ground. It stopped at Colonel Hardenbergh's house. Michael ran to the sleigh. He was picked up and put in. Michael thought he was going on a sleigh ride. Little Nancy was also carried to the sleigh. Michael was surprised when she was not placed beside him. Instead, she was put into a box, and the box was locked. Michael understood what was happening. Like a frightened deer, he sprang from the sleigh, and running to the house, concealed himself under a bed. His hiding place was discovered. He was carried struggling to the sleigh. With a snap of the whip, the driver started the horses. Michael and Nancy were taken away to be sold to another master. Mau and Bomfrey, Dutch word for tree, her father, never saw them again. That is often how enslaved people were taken, because they just didn't want the struggle. Okay, she had 10 or 12 siblings as far as we know. Betsy was James' 3rd wife. His first 2 wives were sold. Betsy never knew her husband's first 2 wives. I want to note that I'm going by the books I've read. and online. There, different sources are telling me different things for Johanne. Also, I'm going to note here that Isabella's birth date is a rough estimate. The conclusions of her birth date came from a testimony from one of her slave owners who said she appeared to be between 12 and 14 when he bought her at auction in 1810. She also claimed there was a quote-unquote dark day in her early childhood, though she, that would have only left her to be about 3 years old when this dark day happened. It was supposedly a eclipse. But how could she have remembered that at such a young age, especially with all the trauma of being an enslaved person? I couldn't find anything about Johanne, his occupation, was he literate, nothing. He died when Isabella was about 2 years old. I got different, different years about when he died, but 1799 was the most agreed upon date, which would have left Isabella, if she was born in 1797, she would have been 2-3 years old. Isabella and her parents became property of Johanne's son Charles upon Johanne's death, who Charles lived nearby. Charles owned a hotel. Let me see, I still got attached paper here, so let's see. I couldn't find the name of Charles's hotel. Okay, I tried, couldn't. He made his slaves sleep in the damp cellar. This caused a lot of issues, including communicable diseases. The enslaved people were always sick, and they were catching it from each other. They were catching it from their surroundings. They were made to sleep in straw, and there was often water. The cellar leaked. There was often water that they had to lay in. When Isabella was around 9, Charles died. The rest of the Hardenbergh, is that their last name? That's their last name. Hardenbergh relatives decided to let Isabella's father go free because he was just too old. And they freed her mom too so she could take care of him. They allowed them to live in that cruddy cellar, which did not help. He was already sick enough, and that just increased everything. Isabella and Peter, her younger brother, were sold to Isabella and Peter were sold. Isabella was sold for $100. From what I understand here, I don't think Peter was sold with Isabella. I think this is where they parted ways, but I can't remember that for exact. Her mom eventually died. It doesn't seem that Isabella was able to see her mom after she was sold this time. Her father died as well. He was unable to take care of himself. The Hardenberghs had put him out in some shanty out in the woods, and he was blind and just decrepit. He couldn't care for himself, so he basically froze and starved to death. It said nothing about how her mom died. I couldn't find anywhere where it says what she died from. John Neely was her new owner. He owned a store that sold goods from the West Indies in Europe. He lived along one of the offshoots of the Hudson River. So the boats would come down the Hudson River and then go to this offshoot river and drop the stuff off at his store. Isabella had an issue now due to the language barrier. John Neely, the Hardenberghs spoke Dutch. John Neely spoke only English. She spoke only Dutch. John spoke only English. Her owner violently attacked her often when she wouldn't do what she was asked. She couldn't understand what he was saying, so she'd just stand there not knowing what to do, or she'd do the wrong thing, get the wrong thing, and he'd beat her. After a mere year or two, she was sold again to Martinus Shriver, who was a fisherman and bar owner. Probably sold, probably because she was just more trouble than she was worth with her not being able to understand the language. For Martinus Shriver, she hoed, carried fish, and ran errands. This seemed her best owner so far, as the work was more industrious, used her mind more, allowed her to make her own judgments, and she had more physical freedom. She was able to go walk outside, down the river, help. She probably being a fish carrier, I'm thinking she probably sold maybe door to door or did deliveries, or at the very least helped Martinus with his job, catching whatever that entailed, whether that be catching the fish or marketing the fish or being in a market, an outdoor market. Sounds good to me. It sounds like a job I might like. At this time, it's when she saw a steamboat for the first time. She saw it going down the river. In 1810, she was about 13, she was sold to John Dumont. He too lived in Ulster County. All her owners up to this point had lived in Ulster. He operated a farm, and sorry if I'm saying that county wrong. As far as I know, I've never heard it said. He operated a farm. He had only approximately 4 slaves. Even here, she was still having issues with the English language. According to her book, Narrative, it seemed Isabella vacillated in her feelings about slavery. It was at Dumont's that she met and became infatuated with Robert, a neighboring enslaved person. This was about 1815 from some of my sources. Robert's owner, Charles, forbade him from seeing her. Robert's owner was going to marry Robert to someone on his own farm, but Robert still continued to see Isabella. One day, Robert set out to see Isabella. Now, I got conflicting stories on this. One story said Charles lied and said Isabella was sick, and so Robert would go to see her. Another story said Isabella was sick, and so Robert wanted to go see her, to help her get well, comfort her. I don't know. It seems according to both stories, Charles already knew that Robert was seeing her, so I don't know why he would make up this story. I don't know. I don't even know. The whole story seems to not make sense because, Robert was Charles' property. Why would he have to catch him in the act? I don't know. Anyways, Charles and his son were secretly following him. When Robert reached the Dumont place, they started beating him. John, Isabella's owner, put a stop to it, followed them home, tried to make sure Robert was safe, but that incident was enough to stop Robert from ever seeing Isabella again. Around 1816, Isabella married Tom. It seemed like it was a forced marriage from John. Tom was a slave from her own farm. They had, Isabella had 5 children total. The first one is suspected to be Robert's, as the time of their courting was about the same time the child was born. Again, slave marriages weren't recognized among states, so they weren't registered, and they were pretty much just civil unions, what we consider civil unions now. The owners of the slaves could force marriage, could force apart marriages, could force somebody to, quote-unquote, marry one person, then take that person away from their spouse, and then, quote-unquote, marry somebody else at any time. It seems like Isabel's marriage to Tom wasn't her desire. There's some suggestion that John, Isabella's owner, may have raped Isabella. Some suggest maybe one or two of her children were even John's. We'll never know. Slaves were to be freed in New York on July 4th, 1827. John told Isabella that he'd free her 1 year early because she was such an industrious slave. He said this to get her to work harder, unbeknownst to her. He claimed, but when the time came, he did not hold up his end of the bargain. And he claimed it was because of her injury. Now, Isabella, during this time period, from the time he said she would be able to go free a year early till the time where he was actually supposed to set her free, she had injured her hand. Apparently a finger had been cut off, but she continued to work. She still worked. He claimed that her injury caused her not to be as industrious as she could have been. Therefore, he was keeping her the full time. Now, this is what caused her to decide to escape. In fall of 1826, Isabella just walked away from the residence with her baby, Sophia, leaving her other kids behind, leaving her husband behind. She ended up at an anti-slavery couple's house. John came to get her, and the family bought her and the baby right on the spot there so she wouldn't have to go back. She found out John had sold her son to a neighbor. Later, she had found John had sold her son to a neighbor who sold him down south where slavery was still legal. All these stories are kind of iffy. Different sources are saying different things. I don't know how accurate this exact story is, but I'm going to tell it to you as I read it in a few sources. So there is at least seems to be some legitimacy to it. Isabella was confident enough to go to the grand jury in Ulster County to procure a pro bono anti-slavery lawyer who needed a little bit of money to get her son back. She raised the money from local abolitionists and to pay for the transporter to bring her son back. The story's a little more detailed than that, but for time's sake, I'm just going to leave it at that. There was more evidence that she was forced into marriage, and this was that Isabella had abandoned her husband. Now it said she had talked to her husband about about going free, and he just said he wasn't interested. It wasn't worth the risk, and so she just left. Isabella moved to New York City with a Mrs. Gear, who was a white teacher, and she took Peter with her. She worked as a house servant in New York City. And in New York City, she became heavily involved in trying to find a religion, a spirituality for her. She went Methodist, then Zion, various black churches. She was thinking about becoming an evangelist, which was really the only thing the church would allow women to do at the time. And even then, you were supposed to be under supervision of a man. She soon came into contact with an Elijah Pearson who ran a religious outreach program, and he hired her on as a housekeeper. This is how she joined the cult.